The tape recorder was found in a dusty box at the back of a closet. May 2023, Marie-Claire Dubois was sorting through her late father's belongings in his Paris apartment. Jean-Paul Dubois had died 3 months earlier at 92, leaving behind 60 years of journalism, articles, photographs, notebooks, and boxes of recordings. Marie-Claire had been systematically cataloging everything, preparing to donate his archive to the National Library of France. Most of the tapes were labeled, dated, archived professionally. But this one was different. It sat at the bottom of a locked metal box. No label, no date, just a piece of masking tape with 2 words written in her father's handwriting. Never publish. Marie-Claire hesitated. Her father had been meticulous about his work. If he'd written never publish, he'd meant it, but he was gone. And she was curious. She loaded the tape into an old player and pressed play. What she heard over the next 90 minutes would change how the world understood Brigitte Bardot and reveal why her father had kept this interview secret for 60 years. The interview had been recorded on March 15, 1963. Jean-Paul Dubois was 32 years old, a rising journalist at Paris Match. He'd been assigned to interview Brigitte Bardot for a cover story about her recent retirement announcement. Standard assignment, standard questions. Expected to produce a standard puff piece about France's most famous export. But what happened during that interview was anything but standard. The tape began with introductions, pleasantries, small talk about the weather. Then Jean-Paul asked his first real question. Why are you retiring at 28? And Brigitte's response, raw, honest, devastating, set the tone for everything that followed. Because I'm dying. Not literally, but the person I was supposed to be is dying, and if I keep going, there won't be anything left to save. Marie-Claire sat frozen as she listened to her father's voice, young, uncertain, clearly unprepared for this level of honesty. Can you explain what you mean by that? I mean that Brigitte Bardot, the actress, the sex symbol, the product, she's killing Brigitte, the real person, the one underneath all the performance. And I have to choose. Keep being her and die, or stop being her and try to find out who I actually am. Her father's voice, hesitant. That's very candid. A bitter laugh from Brigitte. You asked? Most journalists don't actually want honesty. They want quotes they can use. Should I give you those instead? No. Please, keep going. And she did. For the next 90 minutes, Brigitte Bardot gave the most honest interview of her life. She talked about the suicide attempts. Not vaguely, as exhaustion or accidents, but directly, describing the method, the thought process, the desperate need to escape a life that had become unbearable. I've tried 3 times. Pills, mostly. Once I considered drowning. Each time, I thought, this is it. This is how I escape. And each time, someone found me, saved me, sent me back to the thing that was killing me in the first place. She talked about the eating disorder with clinical precision. I stopped eating because it was the only thing I could control. My schedule was controlled. My image was controlled. My relationships were controlled. But what went into my body, that was mine. So I chose nothing. I chose to disappear slowly. At least that way it was my choice. She talked about the dissociation, the feeling of watching her own life from outside her body. I don't know when it started, but at some point, I stopped being present in my own existence. I'd be standing there, smiling, performing, and I'd be watching from somewhere else, like I was a ghost, haunting my own body. Jean-Paul's voice on the tape, quiet and shaken. Brigitte, are you sure you want this on the record? I don't care anymore. What are they going to do? Destroy my career. I'm doing that myself. Take away my fame? I'm throwing it away. Expose me as damaged? Everyone already knows. They just pretend not to. Marie-Claire paused the tape, her hands trembling. This wasn't the Brigitte Bardot of magazine covers. This wasn't the confident sex symbol. This was a woman in crisis, speaking with the desperate honesty of someone who'd stopped caring about consequences. And her father had recorded every word. She pressed play again. The interview shifted to Brigitte's childhood, the ballet training that had been her first experience with having her body controlled by others. I was 7 when they started telling me I was too fat. 7. They'd measure my waist, my thighs, my arms. Everything was numbers and criticism. I learned early that my body wasn't mine. It was a tool, a thing to be perfected for other people's approval. She talked about the photographer who'd abused her at 15. The incident she'd never spoken about publicly. Jean Paul's voice. Careful. Did you ever report it? Report it to who? The police? And tell them what? That a grown man convinced me to pose in ways that made me uncomfortable? That he touched me in ways I didn't want but didn't know how to refuse? That I felt violated but had no language for it because I was 15, and he was an authority figure? A long pause. Then I didn't report it. I buried it, like you're supposed to, like good girls do. The pain in her voice was visceral, raw, unperformed. Brigitte talked about her marriage to Roger Vadim with brutal honesty. He didn't marry me. He married his creation, the idea of what I could become. And then he spent our marriage transforming me into that idea, erasing everything about me that didn't fit his vision. Did you love him? I loved the idea of being loved. But Roger didn't love me. He loved his project. I was raw material, clay he could shape into something valuable. When I finally understood that, it destroyed something in me. What did it destroy? My ability to believe anyone could love the real me, because the real me kept getting in the way of Brigitte Bardot. And everyone, Roger, the studio, the photographers, the world, everyone preferred her, so the real me had to disappear. Marie-Claire wiped tears from her face. This woman, this devastated, honest, broken woman, was nothing like the icon she'd grown up hearing about. The interview took an even darker turn. Brigitte described the constant sexual harassment, not as abstract attention, but as specific, graphic violations. Men grabbing her in public, photographers demanding she pose in degrading ways, directors trading roles for sexual favors. Never explicitly, but the implication always clear. I learned that my body was currency, either access to it, or even the suggestion of potential access, could be traded for work, for protection, for basic professional respect. And if I refused, there were consequences. Jean Paul. What kind of consequences? Being labeled difficult, frigid, ungrateful, having roles go to actresses who were more accommodating, being punished professionally for having boundaries personally. Did you ever accommodate those demands? A long, painful silence. Then yes, not always, but sometimes, when I was desperate enough, when the alternative seemed worse, and every time I did, I hated myself a little more. Marie-Claire paused the tape again. She was crying openly now. This was why her father had never published it. This level of honesty about suicide, abuse, harassment, the darkness of fame. It would have destroyed Brigitte in 1963. The culture wasn't ready. The language didn't exist. Victims were blamed. Mental illness was shameful. Sexual harassment was just how things were. Publishing this interview would have annihilated Brigitte Bardot's career and reputation. Her father had made a choice: protect the subject or publish the truth. He'd chosen protection. The tape continued. Brigitte talked about her relationship with her own image. I see photos of myself, magazine covers, film stills, whatever, and I don't recognize that person. She looks like me, but she's not me. She's a fantasy, a projection, a carefully constructed lie. Do you hate her, Brigitte Bardot, the image? I hate what she costs. I hate that maintaining her requires destroying me. I hate that everyone loves her, and nobody knows me. I hate that I'm trapped inside her, like being buried alive in my own image. Jean-Paul, his voice cracking slightly. What do you want people to know? The real you, I mean, not the image. Brigitte was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost childlike. I like animals more than people. I cry during thunderstorms. I'm terrified of the dark. I hate champagne. I love stupid jokes. I want to garden and read books and be left alone. I'm not confident or fearless or sexually liberated. I'm scared all the time. And I'm so tired. The vulnerability in those words was heartbreaking. This was the real Brigitte, finally speaking. Near the end of the interview, Jean-Paul asked a question that seemed simple but landed like a bomb. If you could go back to before you were famous, knowing everything you know now, would you choose this life? No, not even for the money, the opportunities, especially not for those things, because they're not worth what they cost. Fame didn't give me freedom. It took it away. Money didn't buy happiness. It bought isolation. Opportunities didn't fulfill me. They consumed me. What would you choose instead? Something small, something real. Teaching ballet to children, maybe. Or working at an animal shelter. Something where I could be useful without being consumed. Where I could be a person instead of a product. Do you think you'll ever find that? I don't know. I'm 28, and I don't know who I am. I've spent my entire adult life being someone else. I'm retiring because I need to find out if there's still a real person underneath, if there's anything left to save. The tape ended with Jean-Paul thanking her. Brigitte's voice, exhausted. You're not going to publish this, are you? I don't know. It's important. People should hear this. People should hear a lot of things. That doesn't mean they're ready to, and I'm not ready to be destroyed by the truth. A long pause. Then Jean-Paul's voice, decisive. I won't publish it, not without your permission. Thank you. Click. The recording ended. Marie-Claire sat in silence, staring at the recorder. Her father had kept his word. He'd never published the interview, never even mentioned it, as far as she knew. But he'd kept the tape, locked away, waiting. For what? For the culture to be ready? For Brigitte to give permission? For enough time to pass that the truth wouldn't destroy her? Marie-Claire would never know. Her father had taken that answer to his grave. She spent 3 days deciding what to do. The journalist in her wanted to publish it. This was historical gold, a document of immense cultural and historical importance. But the daughter in her understood why her father had kept it secret. Publishing it, even 60 years later, felt like a violation of trust. Finally, she did what her father had never done. She contacted Brigitte, or rather, she contacted the Brigitte Bardot Foundation and requested a meeting, explaining that she had something Brigitte needed to hear. 3 weeks later, she sat in Brigitte's home in Saint-Tropez, the tape recorder on the table between them. Brigitte was 88 years old. Her face was deeply lined, her hair white, but her eyes, sharp, intelligent, guarded, were unchanged. What is this? She asked, looking at the recorder. An interview you gave my father in 1963. He never published it. Brigitte's face went pale. Jean-Paul Dubois. I remember asking him not to publish it. He kept his word. It's been locked away for 60 years. I found it after he died. And now you're here because Marie-Claire met her eyes. Because it belongs to you, and you should decide what happens to it. Brigitte stared at the recorder for a long moment. Then play it. Marie-Claire watched Brigitte's face as the tape played, watched her listen to her 28-year-old voice, speaking truths she'd never said publicly, describing pain she'd never acknowledged. admitting to things that would have destroyed her in 1963. Brigitte's expression shifted throughout pain, recognition, grief, something that might have been pride. When it ended, she sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, I'd forgotten how honest I was that day. How broken. Do you regret it, being that honest with him? No. I regret that the world wasn't ready to hear it. That speaking truth would have destroyed me. That I had to hide this for 60 years. What should we do with it now? Brigitte thought for a long time. Your father protected me. He could have published this and made his career, exposed me at my most vulnerable, destroyed me for personal gain. But he didn't. He chose to protect me instead. He did. That's rare, almost unheard of in journalism. He put my well-being above his ambition. I didn't know that then. I've spent 60 years assuming everyone who interviewed me was looking for ammunition. Marie Claire smiled. He wasn't that kind of journalist. No. He was better. The world needs more people like him. She made her decision. Publish it. But with context. With an explanation of why he didn't publish it then. With an understanding of how different the world was in 1963. Make it clear that your father's silence was an act of protection, not suppression. The interview was published in October 2023 as a limited edition book with extensive historical context. Marie Claire wrote an introduction explaining her father's decision. Cultural historians provided commentary on the 1963 context, when mental illness was shameful, sexual harassment was normalized, and celebrity vulnerability was career suicide. And Brigitte wrote an epilogue. She reflected on that 28-year-old woman on the tape, the one who was broken and desperate and brutally honest. I don't remember that interview clearly, but listening to it 60 years later, I hear someone drowning, someone screaming for help, in the only way she knew how, through honesty. The world wasn't ready to hear it then. Jean-Paul understood that. He protected me when I couldn't protect myself. Now, 60 years later, the culture has changed. We talk about mental health, about sexual harassment, about the cost of fame. The language exists now. So this interview, this raw, painful, honest testimony can finally exist in the world. Not as destruction, but as documentation. Proof of what it cost to be famous when the world wasn't ready to acknowledge that cost. The book became a phenomenon, not because it was scandalous, though parts were shocking, but because it provided a window into a conversation that couldn't have happened publicly in 1963. A young woman in crisis, speaking with desperate honesty, a journalist choosing protection over profit, and 60 years later, both women, Marie Claire and Brigitte, choosing to finally release the truth. Reviews called it the most important celebrity interview never published, and a time capsule of an era that silenced women's pain. But more than that, it was evidence of an ethical choice. A journalist who'd said no to his own ambition to protect his subject. In a 2024 interview, Brigitte was asked how it felt to hear her younger self speak. Heartbreaking. I wanted to reach through time and tell her, you'll survive this. It will take decades, but you'll find yourself. You'll escape. You'll build a life that matters. What would she say back? Probably that she doesn't believe me. That 28-year-old woman was so broken she couldn't imagine surviving, but she did. We did. What do you want people to take from the interview? That fame isn't what it looks like from the outside. That the cost is higher than anyone imagines. That speaking truth is dangerous when the culture isn't ready to hear it, and that sometimes the most ethical choice is silence, not because the truth doesn't matter, but because the timing does. The journalist who interviewed Brigitte Bardot and never published it made an extraordinary choice. The tape was found 60 years later, and when it was finally released, with context, with care, with permission, it became something more than scandal. It became a document of compassion, evidence that journalism could be ethical even when it meant sacrificing personal gain. proof that protecting the vulnerable sometimes matters more than exposing the truth. Jean-Paul Dubois died never knowing the interview would be published, never seeking credit for his choice, never breaking the confidence Brigitte had placed in him. He'd simply kept his word. For 60 years, until someone who understood the weight of that choice, his daughter found the tape and completed his unfinished work. The interview revealed the truth about Brigitte Bardot, but more importantly, it revealed the truth about Jean-Paul Dubois, a journalist who understood that some stories are more important than careers. That protection can matter more than publication. That silence, sometimes, is the most ethical choice. And that waiting 60 years for the world to be ready is worth it, if it means the truth can finally be told without destroying the person who spoke it. The tape sat in a drawer for 6 decades, but the truth it contained was worth the wait.